Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Chris Shang, and today we have Jeff Lachey, who is the founder CEO of Lachey Communications. Thank you so much for joining us, Jeff.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I've enjoyed the podcast. I've been looking forward to this.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us some time. Tell us a little bit about, what Lachey Communications is now, what you're working on today, types of companies that you work with.
You bet. So I got some great advice when I decided to go on my own and start my own firm about 13 years ago. And people said, stay focused narrowly on those two or three things that you do really well, that you're known for, that you're passionate about, where there's, of course, opportunity, but don't try in this crazy world of public relations and communications to be a jack of all trades. Focus on those two or three areas where you see potential and that you're particularly passionate about. So when I started my own firm, I focused on two or three key areas: executive presentation coaching, storytelling. And
Mm.
I believe that is one of the biggest gaps that exist out there among large companies and small companies, where they get a lot of professional development in some cases, but what's so often overlooked are their speaking and presentation skills. And so I've seen tremendous opportunity there and do a lot of work in that space with many different verticals, from financial services to healthcare and pharma to automotive to food to retail, mostly primarily with Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies, but also with some small budding entrepreneurial organizations out there. So presentation coaching is one cornerstone. The other major cornerstone is media training. So when I left the news business many years ago and migrated to the crazy world of public relations, it made sense that I would focus a lot on media relations and building those media skills among leaders so that they could go on CNBC or Bloomberg or talk to the Wall Street Journal or trade publications. And rather than going in with a survival mindset, going in with a sense of the tremendous opportunity that exists if they're prepared with really well-crafted, crisp, and influential messages. And so presentation coaching, media training, and then I still do carry over from my many years in the big PR agency world, some crisis preparation with large organizations. I can't usually be the Johnny on the spot guy during a crisis because I have other coaching and training and speaking engagements planned. But I do still work with some large organizations to help them prepare for major crises that might erupt at someday. And of course, you want to be prepared well in advance, because if you wait till you have a crisis, that is a terrible time to try to suddenly be preparing and managing it effectively. So that's a brief overview of my practice.
Very cool. Would love to kind of dive into your background. You've been in the news business for quite a while. How did you get started off there? What was the initial, interest in that previous chapter of your career?
I'd always had an interest in writing. I'd always had an interest in current events and what was going on in the world, and actually started my journalism career freelancing for the Associated Press in the Philippines in 1985 during the events leading up to the overthrow of Ferdinand Marcos, the president there, and covering some of the riots and mayhem going on. Kind of got a little bit established then with the Associated Press, went through a graduate journalism program at Northwestern. When I came back, I spent another year at the AP in Hartford, but really decided to give TV news a shot because TV news is multidimensional. And I wasn't necessarily interested in getting my ugly mug on the air, but I did like the multidimensional aspects of television, of bringing people to the scene where events were unfolding. And that was particularly exciting, and combining video and sound and good writing as a complement to that. And so when you do that, you go to very small markets. So I went to Yuma, Arizona for 15 months, little NBC station there, and then to Colorado Springs for 12 months. And then CNBC had just recently started up, and I was fortunate enough to get hired by them to begin to cover business and the financial world. Moved to New York for a couple of years. I had an opportunity to go back then to Chicago, where I'd gone to grad school as a correspondent for CNBC in Chicago. Moved to Fox in Chicago for 3 years, doing the morning shows there, and then reporting business stories for what eventually became the Fox Business Network. and got tired, frankly, Chris, of getting up at 2 o'clock every morning. My son was little, and working until well into the evening at times, and thought there's got to be another way to utilize the communication skills. And I wasn't crazy about the directions that TV news were going. It was going in at that point in time, and that's when I shifted to public relations and ended up working for three of the big agencies based in Chicago, and went in-house twice to head up communications at two different public companies, and then started my own consultancy, Lachey Communications, about 13 years ago. So long-winded way of sharing that kind of migration from news into PR, if you will, and then to the training and coaching work that I do. But the common element has always been storytelling. I mean, that's what's the common denominator in all of that. It's really the art and the science of storytelling, and helping to change executives' mindset. Many go in, and subject matter experts as well. They approach presentations or media interviews with an information or educational mindset. And that's good, but I say let's elevate from informational to influential and persuasive. And so I work with them on ways to do that, from the development of content that is by nature influential, to then the use of voice and body language and executive presence skills to really bring it to life so that it resonates with their target audiences and gets their audiences to actually do what they want the audiences to do, to take action.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious as to like when you made that transition from being more around reporting the news to then going into public relations, like what were it's somewhat of a pivot, right? And how what was it that you would say met expectations, or what were the expectations kind of going into it, and what were the things that you found surprising? I think that's one part of the question. Then the other part of it is obviously then going into and becoming your own company, and basically founding your own business, and then having to do the business development, getting the referrals, which obviously were a lot more hats in those kinds of instances once you move out of a corporate organization. And so what was that transition like? Because I'm sure it was its own journey too, outside of just the core offering.
I'll start with the business development, because
Yeah.
actually that's probably my weak point. I mean, I would say it absolutely is my weak point. I thank God for referrals, because I think if you dive in and you work well with clients, they're going to keep you on board. They're going to come to you time and again, and they're going to refer you to others. And so I've been very fortunate in that regard, because I actually do very little marketing. I network, I stay in touch with a lot of people via LinkedIn, via emails, in-person coffees, virtual coffees, whatever it is. But that's really fun, and it doesn't feel salesy to me.
Mhm.
So referrals has really been the primary generator of my growth over the years. In terms of expectations, I wasn't really sure what to expect fully when I left news. And some of my news colleagues said, "Oh, you're selling your soul now, Jeff. You're going to the dark side of PR." But what I guess was really surprising and cool was that I started to be able to take a stand on issues that I really believed in with clients. I no longer had to ride the fence, if you will, to sit on the fence and be completely neutral or objective, or to try to do that, although we don't see as much of that in news these days, but that was certainly the objective then. And I loved taking a stance on things, and getting involved in programs my clients were involved in, and helping them succeed in bringing good products to market, in bringing good services to market, in giving to great philanthropic organizations that would help to build the reputation of their own organizations as well. And I found that being an advocate and helping them advocate for those ideas and those programs and services was far more rewarding than I ever anticipated it would be. I think in some ways I'm an arguer at heart. I've always been that way. In fact, I went to law school for a year, and then dropped out, because I really did have more of a passion for journalism. But I think I have some of that building an argument, or liking to build an argument, in me. And I was able to employ that in communications, and still do to this day with the clients that I train and coach. Because if you want to make your communications really influential and persuasive, in some ways, you've actually got to think like trial lawyers think. You've got to build an evidence-based case. And so, for example, when entrepreneurs are going out there and joining competitive markets, they've got to distinguish and differentiate themselves in significant ways from others that are already out there. They've got to build a strong value proposition. And in order to do that, they need certain evidence. They need proof points or data points that are going to show that they're different and better. But then what I focus a lot on in my practice is helping leaders personalize that storytelling. So it's not just the data or the facts, but it's bringing those to life and making them real and relevant by sharing one's own insights and anecdotes and experience in ways that are relevant to the points being made. And all of a sudden, that enriches, really enriches the level of influence of those communications. One of my favorite quotes, and I often share this with clients, comes from a guy who's a professor emeritus now at Harvard. His name is Howard Gardner, who has written and spoken a lot on leadership communications. And he says, stories are the single most powerful weapon in a leader's arsenal. And I love that quote because he's basically saying that it's those stories that will really elevate the level of persuasiveness of a leader's communications. That's kind
Absolutely.
of the premise of everything that I train and coach and often speak on.
Yeah. I mean, obviously strong believer in storytelling. I feel like, through what we're doing here, through whether it's, driving awareness, even on the business development side, it's all about storytelling, right? And so, when you think about storytelling, how do you have a way, like, I'm sure you probably have, in this may be conscious or subconscious, but like in terms of how you formulate story, right? Like I know when we go back to plays, it's like the idea of three acts, right? And but like how do you think about storytelling as it relates to, again, that driving an outcome?
Yes.
But is there a formula to it? And is there a way for people to maybe pick things apart a little bit to generate a process for how to do so?
Yes. So I look at the development of a powerful narrative in really three very basic stages. And I'll start with something, and this is not proprietary per se, but then
Yeah.
I'll share a proprietary model that I've developed over the years that fits with that. But first and foremost, I think you've got to have a compelling beginning of a presentation or a narrative where it becomes in an unconventional way, you're engaging the audience and appealing to their curiosity and letting them know right up front that what you're going to share is meaningful and beneficial to them. So it's got to be audience focused and relevant right from the get-go. Then once you've drawn them in, you build that evidence-based middle of your narrative, if you will. And I love the problem solution or challenge opportunity approach to storytelling. I think that's the old journalist in me. So the meat of the presentation needs to make it very clear that there is a real challenge or issue or gap that you are solving for.
Mm.
And once people understand that, now they're going to be much more open to hearing about your specific strategy or solution to address that gap, to take advantage of that opportunity. And then at the end, and this is where I think that opportunities are often missed by leaders presenting or in media interviews, there's the opportunity to briefly, succinctly summarize what it is you've shared, those two or three key messages, if you will, and then to deliver a call to action. If there's something else that the audience can do that will help them take action and move the ball forward, then that's great. So that's an overview. I mean, and that's what many coaches and trainers talk about: a compelling, very interesting, creative beginning, a meaty, evidence-based middle, and a compelling and memorable close. Over the years, I developed a method that I call APEX. It's capital A, capital P, capital E, little x: anticipation, preparation, and execution. And I think those are the three key stages of developing and delivering a powerful presentation. And the anticipation part is inventorying the audience. What's on their minds? What are they interested in? You know this really well from marketing and sales. What are they most interested in? What are they concerned about? So how can I take what I want to share and make sure that I'm acknowledging those interests or concerns up front and appealing to those interests and concerns? That's kind of the anticipation of it. The preparation then is preparing key messages that you're going to build around, usually no more than two or three of those. And we can come back and talk about key messages if you want in a moment. You build around those key messages. And this is all in the preparation phase. And you personalize some of those points as well with some of your own leadership insights and experience and anecdotes, if you will. And sometimes third-party testimonials can be very helpful. And then also as part of the preparation, I say as you're writing and creating it, and then as you're practicing it, once you've got it where you want it, practicing aloud. There is no substitute for that, whether you're getting ready for a presentation or a media interview or a press conference, to have gone through it aloud a few times so it rolls off the tongue conversationally and authentically. And then the third stage of Apex is execution. And that's the powerful use of one's voice and body language and presence to keep that audience engaged and spark their interest and, most importantly, spark their action at the end of the day. And so those are kind of the three key stages of Apex that I focus on with clients, especially in the presentation and public speaking skills that we cover. And I mentioned key messages, and people really struggle with that. I just very recently did a vlog on this subject because people often come to me and say, Jeff, I'm really struggling with what my key messages should be for this upcoming presentation. And I say, don't think of them as key messages. Think of them as key conclusions or takeaways that you need the audience to reach, which, if they reach those, will prompt them to take the action you want them to that you want them to take. But it's not enough just to tell someone we've got the best product or service now in this space. You can say that, but unless you provide them the evidence, the support points, the proof points to significantly distinguish or differentiate what you're offering, it's hollow. It's a hollow claim. So that's where then that evidence and then the personal insights and experiences and perspective of leaders really comes into play to round out the storytelling and make it very real, bring it to life, and therefore make it more influential. So that's how I think about the key messages that I think serve as the cornerstones or the core of any great presentation or media interview. And frankly, in crisis situations as well, you've got to have great clarity on those few things that you know for sure, especially early in a crisis, and stick to those without speculating and without being drawn into other areas by the media. I was one of those media members for years trying to get people to spill the beans, to share more than they were prepared to or willing to. And sometimes I was successful at it, and many times I wasn't. Typically, when I was successful as a reporter in doing that, it was because they weren't well prepared enough.
Fair enough. Interesting. Very interesting. I'm curious too, like, as part of, your coaching and how you think about storytelling, how do you think about EQ and emotional intelligence as part of that, right? I think obviously it's one of those things that are, I think, like, it's almost a prerequisite because everybody makes goes through an action based on emotion. Whether they're fully aware of whatever that emotion is or not, or how that triggered an emotion is a different thing, than the awareness of it. But how do you help people in that area? Like, how important is it as part of that? And then number two would just be for those that aren't intrinsically great or have a strong EQ, is there a way that you can coach or advise people around it?
Sure. Great. Multifaceted question. I take those things one at a time. One of the key things I like to stress is that you need to appeal to your audience's mind with the right kinds of points and evidence that you know are going to address their specific interests and concerns. And every audience is a little bit different. But we also want to appeal to their hearts emotionally. If we want people to take action, they've got to feel the passion and the enthusiasm that we feel. And our audiences are never going to be any more passionate or enthusiastic than we are about the subjects we're addressing. So you've got to exude that genuine conviction and passion that you have. For some introverts, that's more challenging. For extroverts, it comes easy. But I encourage even introverts to work the room before a presentation. Talk to folks who are going to be in the audience, or talk to folks who know a little more about the audience. Get a sense of the humanity in the room. Again, what are they worried about? What's on their mind? What are they most interested in hearing? What's going to benefit them most? Doing that kind of inventorying of the audience helps us then prepare the right kinds of messages and proof points and personal insights that are going to resonate with them. I actually encourage leaders, many of them, believe it or not, and I know you know this, are actually quite humble. And when they go and they speak to investors at their investor days or at analyst conferences, or they go before other audiences, they kind of check themselves at the door and they make it all about the company and the data points and the milestones that they've hit and the challenges and opportunities. Those are all important elements. But I'm pushing them to weave in what's their take of what that means for the company's future, or for those in the audience. What does this mean to them? And I encourage people to keep a running list of experiences they have, conversations that they have with customers or with employees that speak to the important points they're going to make in a presentation, and to weave some of that into the mix, because again, it makes it very, very real and meaningful for the audience. It makes it more relatable. So I tell people, keep a running list of those experiences, those thoughts, those perspectives that hit us sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes first thing in the morning. But then when it comes time to create a presentation or to get ready for a media interview, you can cherry pick from that list those particular anecdotes or thoughts that you had that apply particularly well to this situation, this particular communications venue that you're going into.
Got it. Um, and has there been ever like any resource that you've advised people to take up, whether it's like a Toastmasters or, taking up like some creative endeavor to get more in tune with maybe that muscle that may feel very uncomfortable?
So for some people, Toastmasters is a great organization. I've never been a member. I've been to a couple of meetings. I have found Toastmasters to be more focused on performance.
Yeah.
And I, in a way, focus not on performance. In fact, I might be an anti-performance coach, because it's not about performance, it's about authenticity. And you hear that from audiences time and again, that what they either really liked or didn't like was how authentic the speaker was. And if they think the speaker's just on message and overly rehearsed or contrived, it's not really going to resonate. And so I have found Toastmasters is they do a lot of great things to help people's speaking capabilities, but it does tend to be focused more on performance, whereas I focus on building a case, building a strong narrative with personal insights woven in, that's less about performance and more about genuine persuasion to discerning audiences, not just to general audiences, but to investor audiences who are pretty sophisticated or discerning. They don't want to see a lot of pomp and circumstance. What they want to do is they want to see and hear genuine passion and the right evidence that's going to them to buy the company, hold the stock, sell, whatever it is that's going to have that kind of influence. So another group that I am part of, and this sounds like a plug, but it's just another great resource, is the National Speakers Association. And I didn't even know about this organization until several years ago when we moved from Chicago to Arizona. And someone introduced me to the organization. I'm on the board now of the Arizona chapter. It's a terrific organization that has a little more of a business speaking and presenting focus. And there are tremendous resources available to people. Toastmasters has great resources. The NSA, National Speakers Association, has great resources. Those are just two of them. For people who work actually in the public relations or communications world, The PRSA, Public Relations Society of America, is a great organization that has a lot of terrific resources. And these are national organizations, but with strong chapters. One other one for entrepreneurs and investors in your audience, and that is the investor. What is it? It's NIRI, the National Institute or National Investor Relations Institute, I think is what it stands for. And they have chapters in the major urban areas. And they do some great work for those who are more directly involved in investor relations and communications. So there are a number of great groups out there. IABC, the International Association of Business Communicators, they've got tremendous resources. I was a member for a number of years ago in Chicago. That was a great group. So those are some. There are lots of books on the subject, so many books. And they're great resources, but some I think kind of overdo it a little bit too and get people thinking about so many things, stage presence and prompter reading. I mean, these are all important things and techniques, but at the end of the day, what people want to see and hear is authentic passion and knowledge of the subject matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I feel like, for you to be in a position where you are in a speaking environment, or you're talking to getting media ready and talking to media, like the table stakes is already knowing the area of expertise you're speaking on backwards and forwards, right? I think the presentation, how you go about it it's what differentiates a great, public speaker or leader versus somebody who obviously is an introvert who's naturally uncomfortable in front of that. I mean, I've also seen, I think like people take like senior leaders take like acting classes, right? Like something that really gets them outside of their comfort zone, where it's like you're actually connecting to emotions and getting in front of a room of strangers and sharing those emotions to a certain degree.
Improv. A lot of people, I never did, but a lot of
Yeah,
people have taken improv and benefited greatly from that.
absolutely, right. So some of these outside of the box things I feel like can really push that, because it is getting uncomfortable to the point where then that you can access certain things that the rest of the population generally has a hard time relating to.
Absolutely true. And in fact, I just thought about Q&A. So
Mm,
this is what so many speakers fear most is, okay, well, I got the presentation down, Jeff. I feel really good about that. But my God, suppose they ask me about this or that, or suppose I'm on the air with Bloomberg or at CNBC and live television, and there's our stock price is on the line here. And suppose they ask me a question and I don't know the answer to. And so I do a lot of work around Q&A. I think it is the greatest opportunity to
mhm,
get your messages across because you're doing it on someone else's terms. So the model that I created when I started doing media training years ago in the PR agency world is a Q&A management model that I have imported into my presentation coaching as well. And I focus a good deal of time on Q&A management because I see people do fantastic presentations and it comes to Q&A and you literally physically sometimes see them take a step back on the stage, or all of a sudden it's this defensive response only mindset. And I think the toughest questions are actually the greatest opportunities when you're prepared, when you can respond credibly and succinctly to the question, but then lead the discussion back conversationally and authentically to your key messages. And the fear of not knowing all the answers, I say, take a load off. You're only human. You can't know everything. If you get asked about a detail and you don't have it, that particular data point at the ready, buy yourself time. Say, you know what? That's a great question, Chris. I want to make sure you get the most accurate answer. Let me let me find out. I'll circle back with you. But meanwhile, what I can tell you, or what I do know, or the reason that we are here today is to talk about. And so that's where the opportunity is to bring it back then to your key message. And this is it's a technique that when practiced starts to become second nature, and you see great speakers out there and great media interviewees doing this very effectively, all the while having answered the question from the reporter directly to the best of their ability. If you're not willing to do that, and you skirt or skip the question or dodge the question and go right to your message like we see some politicians do, I think you lose credibility. And then I don't even want to hear as an audience member what else you have to say because you didn't answer a valid question, or at least give me the best that you've got in addressing that particular question.
Yeah.
So Q&A is a huge, often untapped opportunity for leaders.
Interesting. I love how it's kind of like come full circle where it's like you're help protecting them from what you were doing before as a news reporter, which is trying to get them to overshare, and now you're protecting them from oversharing things that might impact
Exactly.
them negatively, right? So you know
Exactly.
what the tactics are that the reporters are going to probably be doing, and so you're now training people on that.
It's
That's
a lot of fun. I mean, when you see the lights go on, all of
yeah,
a sudden, I've had some leaders who didn't want to have to do any interviews. They're begging their PR teams to get them more of those because it's almost a little bit like a chess game. It's a
yeah,
strategic challenge for them. And if they're good at it,
yeah,
they understand that the toughest questions actually provide tremendous opportunities to build your credibility and your reputation with your audiences.
absolutely. Very cool. On that note, I know we're at time, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your insights. It's a very great conversation. And I think there's a lot of great nuggets in here.
Thank you so much, Chris. And by the way, if anybody wants to learn more, here's a little bit of a plug, but they can go to lacheytraining.com. And I actually created a coupon
Awesome.
for your audience if they're interested in the online course. I know it sounds like I'm selling here. I guess I am, but just if
Oh,
they want
good.
a
Yeah.
resource, lacheytraining.com. The coupon is podcast 50%. Podcast 50% with the percentage symbol. And take a look, and hopefully you'll find great guidance there. And people should always feel free to reach out to me directly if they'd like to do that. But thanks for the opportunity, Chris. Great to be a part of the program.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Take care. Be well.